I'm Maribel Tarouk. Tonight, the investigation continues into a weekend shooting in Stony Creek that left 2 tenants and their landlord dead.
I heard a whole bunch of shots, right? My quickest thing I thought, right, I'm going down to the ground. It sounded like it was in my house. That's how loud it was.
We'll have new details about what may have sparked the dispute that led to the deadly violence. And
the answer to the housing crisis isn't tent encampments in parks.
Encampments cannot be allowed to continue.
Details on how mayoral by-election candidates say they'll handle the city's homeless encampments. Plus,
it doesn't seem fair that we pay for permits, but we can't find spots to park.
We'll take you to a Beaches neighborhood where a battle is brewing between residents and the city after a recent move to ditch on-street overnight parking. Good evening. Candidates running to be mayor of Toronto offered up their plans to deal with the city's homeless encampments. While different approaches on the issue were put forward, it's clear no one feels a status quo approach is working. Ali Chiasson reports.
It's pretty dire.
Brian Cleary would know. He was homeless throughout the pandemic and recently secured housing through a Streets to Homes program with the city.
That was very difficult and felt almost hopeless at times.
He now lives in a rent geared to income unit and routinely checks in on the folks living outside in Allen Gardens, where he estimates about 70 people live. He says with the election coming up, he's cautiously optimistic things will get better for them. But
those right-wing voices that amplify that idea, that think that it's a great idea to come in here with cops and just clear the whole thing out.
Make no mistake, encampments cannot be allowed to continue and must be removed while preserving the dignity to those people that live in the encampments.
The former police chief, now mayoral candidate Mark Saunders, didn't elaborate on how he would see the tents removed, but he did say he would make it easier for people to get into outreach work.
I'll call on the province to waive tuition for the next 3 years for students pursuing a certificate at a Toronto college as a mental health, addiction, or supportive housing worker.
Candidate Anna Bailau addressed encampments in her housing announcement today in front of a supportive housing building.
That's why I'm here, to say this is the kind of housing that we need. This is the kind of support that we need to bring people inside immediately.
Bradford boasted the housing he says he championed as housing chair.
And as councillor, I built 59 supportive housing units with wraparound supports, apartments that people are renting right now today in East York.
Encampments came up at one of the debates last week.
Sometimes people fall into an experience, and it's our job as a city to just not let them fail.
We need to immediately take 1,000 folks out of the shelter through a rent supplement program.
Josh Matlow talked specifically about shelter conditions.
We need to address that head on. Yes, it's a Band-Aid approach to have shelters, but they need to be humane places for people.
Which many living outside say they are not.
I was in there for like 2 weeks and I was getting bit by bed bugs. And I said, no more, I can't do this. And I ended up being out here.
With the election comes opportunity for change, for a community counting on it.
Expand space so they actually do have safe indoor spaces to offer people, and to double, triple down on those housing efforts.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Police are calling it a landlord-tenant dispute that left 3 people dead. As the investigation continues, harrowing details are emerging from neighbors living near the scene of the shootings. Our Greg Ross is live tonight in Stony Creek. Greg, you've learned some new information about what may have led to all of this?
Yeah, Maribel, according to police, a young couple that was living in the basement of this home here behind me were shot and killed by their landlord on Saturday evening. That landlord then had a standoff with police that lasted for several hours before he was eventually killed in an exchange of gunfire with police. Now we're learning that that dispute between the tenants and the landlord may have been about a mold problem in the house. Hamilton police have still not identified the young couple who were killed at this home on Saturday night. Detectives want to first meet with their families.
This is a devastating situation for them, and they need some time. They need some time, they need some space. They're grieving.
A 27-year-old woman and a 28-year-old man were renting a basement apartment in the house. Police say it appears there may have been some recent tension between the couple and their landlord.
There's some indication it might have been a dispute over some mold. So that's what we're investigating, to see if that's in fact what this was about.
Police are still trying to get a better understanding of how things escalated Saturday night, eventually leading to the landlord shooting and killing his tenants. Police have not released the identity of the shooter. Property records show the home is owned by Terry Gerald Brecka, who is well known to his neighbors.
He wasn't the friendliest kind of person.
Joanne and Tony Greenlee have lived next door for 16 years. They did not have a good relationship with their neighbor.
I tried my best to ignore him.
Joanne was home alone on Saturday night and heard the gunshots.
It sounded like it was in my house. That's how loud it was, eh? My quickest thing, I thought, right, I'm going down to the ground. That's it, because my living room has a bunch of windows.
They had not met the young couple that rented the basement.
I never knew them, but I heard about it, and I just feel terrible what happened.
In addition to the homicide investigation that is going on here, the Special Investigations Unit is also on scene. They're called in anytime there is a death involving officers, and they're investigating what exactly happened during that standoff between police and the landlord and owner of this home. Maribel?
All right, Greg, thank you for this. A motorcyclist has died after colliding with a pickup truck this morning in King Township.
A driver of a motorcycle was traveling southbound on James Street when a truck hauling a large-sized trailer exited a private drive. The motorcycle collided with the truck, and unfortunately, the motorcycle and the driver suffered severe damage and injuries.
Police say the motorcyclist was later pronounced dead at the scene. He's a male in his 30s. The driver of the pickup truck remained at the scene and is cooperating with police. Investigators are asking anyone who was in the area of Jane and Davis Drive West around 8 this morning, or anyone who may have dash cam video, to call York Police. A group of motorists in the Beaches neighborhood is pushing back against a city council decision to eliminate hundreds of overnight parking permit spots. The move has left some who have paid for the permits driving around other neighborhoods in search of a place to park. Meg Roberts explains.
I would think we've spent $500–600 on tickets the past year or so.
Despite buying a parking permit for the Beaches area, John Dell says he can't find a spot near his home and resorts to parking illegally.
It doesn't seem fair that we pay for permits, but we can't find spots to park.
Some Beaches area residents say parking became an issue last year when a decision to limit on-street overnight parking came into effect. In 2021, a poll found residents living on 8 streets were in favor of eliminating the parking. But many of those residents had their own driveways. The city recommended councillors ignore the poll results, but local councillor Brad Bradford and others voted against the city's recommendation. In a statement, Bradford's team said the people who live there know those streets better than City Hall does.
It promotes NIMBYism, and I really think that our political leaders have a responsibility to fight back and push back about NIMBYism in order to do the right thing.
David Frame organized a community meeting. He sent a letter to Councillor Brad Bradford with residents' concerns.
The whole neighborhood is concerned with the parking situation.
It's an issue that's consumed the neighborhood for years, but not everyone wants to see the parking ban lifted. Michael Mallinson bought his house with the understanding there would be no street parking.
I wouldn't mind so much if they parked overnight and then left, but they don't. They come and leave their car here for days on end.
Residents can ask the city for a poll so they can vote on whether they want street parking for their road. However, they can't vote in parking bans on nearby streets, even if they use them to park. Councillor Bradford, in a statement to CBC Toronto, said that residents here at McLean Avenue have requested a poll. As for those 7 other streets, he says residents need to reach out to the city to do the same. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, coming off a glorious weekend Monday, pretty good too, Colette.
Yeah, here we are. It's going to be a glorious week, likely a glorious weekend next weekend. A lot going on here with this, well, or a lot not going on if you look at it in terms of this blocking pattern that's not allowing any weather patterns to move through here or systems that would bring any significant rainfall, and also really heating things up in some cases. Now, you see where that is? Northern Ontario. So we were a little cooler today than yesterday because of the winds coming in off the lake. It was certainly cooler near the lakeshore, so 24 degrees, but you know, Moosonee 5 degrees warmer than what it is in Toronto, and 7 degrees earlier in Pickle Lake when they were up into the low 30s. And indeed, it's in this area of the province where there is a heat warning, and just keeping in mind kind of there are different criteria for this depending on the location. So looking at highs 29 to 33 throughout this area, and even the overnight lows being on the very mild side. But then we have to factor in the sunshine and these very dry conditions that we're seeing as well. So we do have in the province of Ontario some active wildfires, and in fact some new ones. I think I counted about 8 new fires in that category too. And this is going to become the problem as things are just continuing to dry out here. So I put this so large because I wanted you to see clockwise circulation. That's sinking stable air with high pressure. It's blocking all this convective stuff off to the west. But you can even see it if I pull that off just and see how the clouds are moving around, just needing to go around this ridge. They cannot make it through. That is the block. Overnight tonight, 14 degrees. We're warming back up tomorrow with a bit of a change in those winds. Marival, 27. We'll look at when the next chance for rain showers might be when I come back.
Okay, we'll see you in a few minutes again. Thanks, Colette. A wildfire near Halifax is still burning out of control. Numerous homes and buildings have already been destroyed, and an evacuation order remains under effect for more than 16,000 people. Blair Rhodes has the latest.
The fire appeared to hopscotch through the homes in Westwood, scorching some, leaving some unscathed, and burning others right down to the foundation. In some cases, the fire came right up to a property line, where firefighters were able to beat it back.
Our first arriving crews did discover a very large and fast-moving fire going through that subdivision, and in fact traveled so significantly that we quickly escalated through 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th alarms, which is the first use of a 5th alarm that many of us can remember in this community.
Those people who were forced to flee their homes last night have been told to expect to remain out of them for days. Meldrum says it will take at least that long for firefighters to identify which homes survived and which were burned to the ground.
We do know for sure that a number of structures are damaged and some are completely lost. And you know, it is a concern, and it will be a priority to kind of inform people as we can get that information. But right now, with the intensity of these fires, the resources are completely focused on tamping them back, but also the safety of our firefighters is the number one priority.
When pressed, Premier Houston said there are dozens of structures that have been destroyed.
We can only imagine the fear that you're feeling, the uncertainty you're feeling about when you will be able to return to your home, what you may be returning to, and we know that the fear must be just completely unimaginable.
The evacuation order for the Tantallon area now includes more than 16,000 people. They're being urged to register with the municipal 311 information number so that officials can keep track of who's out of their homes. Blair Rhodes, CBC News, Halifax.
Go.
There are many stories of close calls coming out of Nova Scotia. Coming up at 6:30, we'll hear from a couple who drove through this to get to safety. The provincial NDP and the Ontario Autism Coalition say too many kids with special needs are being excluded from school. Students may be told they can't stay because of behavioral issues or a lack of support for them. As Loretta Redekop explains, advocates are calling for clearer guidelines.
Parents of children with autism have long been fighting for more support. Today, they raised another concern: exclusions from school. Parent Steve Legault says his son Elliot, now in grade 12, hurt another student and was excluded from April of last year until the end of the school year.
Elliot was bored and understimulated. This brought about more challenging behaviors we had to deal with at home.
leaving us exhausted.
That's an extreme case. The NDP and the Ontario Autism Coalition say there are many other exclusions happening, and that so-called soft exclusions, such as when a student is sent home partway through the day or told to voluntarily stay home, aren't tracked.
Every effort should be made to get the kid back into school as quickly as possible. And what's happening more often is that schools are managing their staffing challenges off the backs of children with disabilities.
One NDP MPP did an informal online survey of parents, finding that just in the past 2 weeks, 78 children missed a total of more than 550 hours of school due to exclusions.
There needs to be some rules and parameters. So right now, there's literally no rules about how long these exclusions can be.
She compares that to suspensions that can last for a maximum of 20 days. The spokesperson for the education minister says exclusions are tracked, though didn't respond to whether that includes soft exclusions.
Students, staff, and parents can see with their own eyes that the supports are not there in our schools for our children when they need them.
The minister responded with numbers.
There are 3,000 more education assistants hired by our government under our Premier's leadership. We too want to make sure that there's value for those investments.
The Ontario Autism Coalition recognizes exclusions are sometimes unavoidable.
If you've got safety issues in a classroom, if somebody is hurt, if a plan needs to be put in place for a child, then absolutely.
But she says more educational assistance and more specialized training would mean they happen less frequently. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, the Ontario government is investing more than $6 million to help people with disabilities find jobs.
At a time when 300,000 jobs are going unfilled, giving people with disabilities a hand up to a better life isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good for the bottom line. Because people with disabilities represent a large talent pool of skilled workers.
The new funding will support 5 projects that will offer free training programs. Those programs will help mentor and employ almost 4,000 Ontarians who are blind or deaf, or those with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The City of Toronto unveiled a new facility today that is designed to be set on fire.
Last year alone, our crews responded to more than 168,000 emergency incidents in our city. More than 36,000 of those emergencies were fire responses. In order for our crews to meet these challenges as safely, efficiently, and effectively as possible, it is critical that we are able to provide them with the hands-on live fire training that they require.
The multi-story building is the latest addition to a growing number of fire protection training facilities. It will allow for more than 12 unique fire training scenarios, including basement fires. The new facility also includes features that will ensure safety during the training exercises, including ventilation controls, as well as systems to monitor gas and the intensity of. A musical is set to break the glass ceiling for Filipino actors. The first ever all-Filipino cast will take the stage this summer in a political drama about the tumultuous rise and fall of Imelda Marcos, the former First Lady of the Philippines. Chris Reyes reports from New York.
From the first introduction of Here Lies Love, the atmosphere was downright fam jam. No doubt a big part of that family feel that this entire cast is Filipino, a first for Broadway. Here Lies Love opened off-Broadway in 2013, but not with this historic casting. Tony winner Lea Salonga, Broadway's biggest Filipino star, is both acting and producing on the show. She helped with finding all that Filipino talent.
I need a minute to process this because it's never been seen before. It's kind of unprecedented. So it's something that I felt incredibly proud of.
Salonga was cast as the original Miss Saigon more than 30 years ago, playing a Vietnamese girl. She knows too well that roles for Filipino actors on Broadway have been limited.
I was in for a rude awakening when I was told that I couldn't audition for certain shows because of my racial background.
That experience echoed by the rest of the cast. For them, this show is overdue.
Why did it take this long? It's about time. I wonder what your reaction to it is.
I'm the same way.
Here Lies Love was conceived by musicians David Byrne and Fatboy Slim and writer Alex Timbers. But it is a Filipino story, a disco-themed musical about former Philippines First Lady Imelda Marcos, wife of the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos, and their rise and fall from power.
This is the first time I'm getting to play my own heritage, so I feel like I don't have to hide. I feel like I don't have to pretend to be somebody that I'm not.
While the show is being celebrated for making history, some critics have called it a too glossy retelling of the Marcoses' violent and criminal past.
We're showing the party that the Marcoses had for 20 years, but we're also telling a story about how the hangover happened after that party, after they switched the lights on in the disco.
Despite the controversies, for now, this cast is celebrating history and the promise it brings.
It's really exciting to see what is now possible.
A first for Broadway, but also a blooming of Filipino talent taking center stage.
It's more fun where?
In the Philippines! Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
As a small child, Basma Hamid's face was severely burned. For years, she struggled to find the right makeup to camouflage her scars. Finally, she created her own cosmetics line, and now she's got the attention of beauty giant Sephora. Sophia Harris has her story.
Now we have shade 33.
For Basma Hamid, it's still sinking in. Her 40-shade foundation, called Basma, is selling at beauty giant Sephora.
I'm still in disbelief. I mean, growing up, I didn't see anybody that looked like me, that was, that owned a beauty brand, that was Middle Eastern, that was a burn survivor.
At the age of 2 in her native country, Iraq, Hamid's face was burned in a kitchen accident. She tried to cover the scars, but couldn't find a foundation that worked.
I always struggled even finding my shade, so that's why I made sure I launched my brand with 40 different colors. We want to make sure that everybody feels included.
I use Natural Wonder oil-free makeup.
In the past, the beauty industry has been criticized for not being inclusive. Now, that's changing.
You should be accepted as you are.
Last week, Hamid took part in a Sephora-hosted discussion panel on diversity in the beauty industry. Sephora partnered with Hamid as part of its commitment to sell more brands with diverse owners.
She is at the core of all we're trying to accomplish. It's critical that we are truly reflecting the community we represent.
Still, Hamid faces challenges, such as stiff competition.
You want more.
Pop star Rihanna's foundation now boasts more than 50 shades.
Shade 001 right here.
There's also criticism from a beauty blogger that Hamid's darkest shade isn't dark enough.
Companies should make our shade.
I have a hard time finding foundation.
This communications expert says even though foundations have become more inclusive, they often still lack darker shades.
They just haven't been putting the science into developing the products that are actually going to address all the little undertones in black skin.
In response to the complaint, Hamid spent more than 2 months developing 2 deeper shades.
I don't want anybody to feel like they're left out.
Hamid says customer feedback will guide her brand because everyone should be able to find their match. Sophia Harris, CBC.
Ukraine's capital has come under fresh attack today. This dramatic video shows the moment missile debris crashed onto a car on a busy street in Kyiv. It's the result of Ukraine's air defense system intercepting the missile. Its target is unknown. CBC's Dominic Velitis has more on the new wave of airstrikes.
One person was reportedly injured as a result of this attack. It doesn't appear to have done any major damage, none that we're being told about anyway. But this was Russia's first daylight attack on Kyiv this month, and some remarkable pictures have emerged showing how it all unfolded. Ukrainian officials say Russia used ballistic missiles to attack Kyiv this morning, possibly repurposed surface-to-air missiles. And when the sirens sounded, people in the capital, as they are so used to now, headed into air raid shelters. We're told All of the missiles fired at Kyiv in this morning's attack were shot down. None of their intended targets were hit, so the capital's air defences appear to have done their job. But this was just the second attack of the day. In the very early hours of the morning, Russia launched a combination of drones and cruise missiles against Kyiv. We're told 67 were shot down in and around the capital, but some elsewhere did get through. The Black Sea port of Odessa and a military installation in the west of the country were hit. Officials say a runway there was damaged and 5 aircraft were taken out of service. And then before that, in the early hours of Sunday morning, Russia launched that massive drone attack on Kyiv, the largest attack of its kind since the war began. The majority of the 60 so-called kamikaze drones were downed, but falling debris damaged buildings, killed 2 people and injured several others. Dominic Velitis, CBC News, London.
A top U.S. Republican senator is now on Russia's wanted list for comments he made during a visit to Kyiv last week.
The best money we've ever spent.
Thank you so much.
No, it's, you know, we're on this is 457th day of a war that was supposed to last 3 days. You amaze me.
Now you are free.
Yes.
And we will be.
And the Russians are dying.
And it's that exchange with Ukraine's president that has angered Moscow. Russia's investigative committee has opened a criminal case against Lindsey Graham, who describes the arrest warrant issued against him as a badge of honor. In the U.S., Republican and Democratic lawmakers are poring over a 99-page bill. It contains the details of a tentative deal to raise the country's debt ceiling and avert what the U.S. president says would be a catastrophic default. Joe Biden says he'll sign it, but first it needs congressional approval. Magda Gabriselassie has the details from Washington.
Are you confident this deal will get to your debt?
Yes.
A confident Joe Biden says the debt ceiling deal will pass. The details include lifting the borrowing limit until after the 2024 election and rolling back some IRS funding and unspent COVID money.
It takes the threat of catastrophic default off the table, protects our hard-earned and historic economic recovery.
Republican House Leader Kevin McCarthy says it's a step in the right direction.
America believes that we've spent too much, so this spends less.
But the deal comes with criticism from both sides. Some conservatives say it will add trillions of dollars of debt with minimal spending restrictions, while some Democrats worry about a detail that limits access to some government aid like food stamps by expanding work requirements.
We've seen reams of data that show that when you put these work requirements in, they're really just administrative red tape that prevent the people who need help from getting help.
But the deal had to get done, and some say it's a win for all Americans.
For American people, they're going to be like, I don't understand half of the things that are going on in this debate. However, I do know if we default, the stock market's going to go down, things are going to get more difficult for my pocketbook, I'm going to see my investments plummet.
Lawmakers in the House and the Senate have a few days to look over the details before it goes to a vote. Democratic and Republican leadership seem confident it will go through, so Biden can sign the bill and put an end to the debt ceiling crisis. Magda Gabriselassie, CBC News, Washington.
The federal government is enhancing supports for Indigenous victims and survivors of crime. Ottawa is planning to spend more than $95 million over the next 5 years and another $20 million annually. The Justice Minister says the new funding will help bring culturally safe supports to remote areas.
We need for people to be able to have increased safety and protection, improve access to justice, respect rights, and support healing from the aftermath of harm and victimization. And the new ways should be Indigenous-led, sustainable, and responsive. Indigenous agencies and organizations know what they need from the justice system and what they need to assist victims in their healing journey. So this simply is the best way forward in supporting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis victims and survivors of crime. To all victims and survivors, you deserve to know that these important programs will be there for as long as you need them.
Voters in Alberta are casting ballots today to elect the next provincial government. Polls suggest the United Conservative Party and the Alberta NDP are in a tight race, with Calgary being a decisive spot. Malika Karim has the story.
Battleground Calgary is the focus of today's election in Alberta. The UCP, along with the NDP, are looking to sway votes amongst small C Conservatives. Here in this riding of Calgary-Bow, we have UCP incumbent Demetrius Nicolaitis, the Advanced Education Minister, squaring up against a well-known face in Calgary, six-term City Councillor Drew Farrell. CBC pollster Janet Brown on what her research showed about voters in Alberta.
We're calling this a close election, but out of 87 seats, it's really not close in about 67 of them. It's a close election in 20 seats. So we're really going to zero in on those seats that are mostly in Calgary, and we're going to be looking to see whether, which party can get their vote out. Which voters are most enthusiastic? Which ones get out to vote?
Brown also mentioning in her polling numbers that about 12% of voters are still undecided. So that's where these candidates are looking for their votes. Brown's research showed healthcare was top of mind, followed by the economy, inflation, and leadership. With trust in the government elected being one of the key issues, one former political columnist weighing in on how heavily this will matter for voters.
They're both promising to do better on the economy. They're both promising jobs. Yes, the UCP is spending $68 billion. The NDP would be spending just as much if they were in power. So it becomes an issue of who do you trust to become the premier and run this province? And that, I think, is sort of the ballot box question put into one single issue.
Polling stations in Alberta are open until 8 p.m. tonight. Malika Karim, CBC News, Calgary.
In British Columbia, new evacuation orders have been issued in the sparsely populated Peace region. The Donny Creek fire burning near Fort Nelson covers more than 1,300 square kilometers. It's one of the largest wildfires that remains burning out of control in British Columbia. In New Brunswick, fire crews are battling a forest fire near the community of St. Andrews. 400 homes have now been evacuated, and at least one home has been destroyed.
Currently, right now, we are facing an active and ongoing situation with a forest fire. Although progress is being made, it's important to note that at this particular time, the fire is still not controlled. I know that members of Shamcook and the Boquebec area really do want to get back to their property and make sure that it is intact, but at this particular time, please do not return to the area. Not only are you putting yourself in danger, but you are also putting emergency response team members in danger as well.
The community's fire chief says an ATV caught fire yesterday and the flames spread to the surrounding dry woods. It has since jumped highways and waterways and is now burning in several different areas. Well, the out-of-control fire in a Halifax suburb has destroyed homes and forced thousands of people to flee. For some residents, the road to safety took them straight through the blaze. Paul Withers reports.
Can't see anything. These are some of the scariest images from the Tantallon fire, an escape along the Hammonds Plains Road as it is engulfed in flames. Peter and Marion Gillespie were in the car seen in front on this dash cam video. They had been turned around by police when they reached their Highland Park subdivision and were making their way to Bedford when fire descended upon them.
Within 2 minutes of driving down the road, we were engulfed in flames and darkness, and it was one of the most surreal moments we've ever had, or I've ever had. I know Peter as well. It was terrifying. We could feel the heat coming to the car. We couldn't see in front of us. There were a couple of times where he actually was heading off to the curb. We thought for sure we were going to go in the ditch, but we were able just to pull it back. We honestly thought we were going to die. It was ash and sparks falling down onto the car, the heat, the flames coming up from the trees on both sides. It was unbelievable because it just flew, like carried over the car as we were trying to drive down towards Pockwalk. And yeah, absolutely terrifying. Absolutely terrifying.
Behind the wheel, Peter Gillespie nearly drove off the road in an attempt to get away.
I was trying to go as fast as I could, but
even the people behind us in the video had said, just book it. That was my first instinct at the start, but of course then I hit the curb and realized I can't go as fast as I want to go. I'm going to have to try to go as safely to try to stay on the road and not end up off of it. Just hoped and hoped and hoped that eventually we would either pass the speed of the fire that was racing ahead, and then eventually we saw some clearing as the video shows, and then got out of it, which was the best moment of my life.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
They were not the only ones with survival stories.
There was a silver car just completely on fire in the middle of the road.
Kelly Lauren also escaped the flames. She doubts her house has survived.
With the winds, it's most likely not still standing, unfortunately.
You take what you can, and like my wife said, there's nothing more important than what we have here.
Doug O'Coin, another evacuee.
Last week we're talking about the fires in Alberta and saying, oh, feel so bad for those people, and now we're those people. So, yeah.
For so many, a time to reflect that life can change in an instant. Paul Withers, CBC News, Halifax.
You know, Colette, we're seeing there the real impact, the human impact of these fires that are burning, and now they're on both ends of the country.
Yeah, they really are, and we have some burning as well in Ontario, and so just such harrowing experiences, hearing, you know, what it's like, what they're dealing with going through that. And you can see some of the smoke here coming off. These are separate fires, even larger actually, in southwestern parts of Nova Scotia there near Shelburne, but the population center obviously really impacted here closer to Halifax, where that's burning. And you heard the winds mentioned in those reports, and you can really kind of see how these fires jump across the highway or the roadway from house to house. Those winds really can have an impact in here. And what we're going to be finding is, sure, they get a little bit lighter tonight, which is a good thing. Lighter winds mean it helps that it can't spread as much, and it helps the firefighters out. But what isn't good news, as I look ahead to Tuesday and we look into Wednesday as well, is that the wind direction goes more south to southwesterly, and that is a drying wind. And they're already looking at very dry conditions in Nova Scotia. Next chance of getting some rain showers in the forecast, maybe Thursday night into Friday, but looks like light stuff, not a soaking rain. So they too are under the influence of the weather pattern that's giving us the very beautiful conditions, but also very drying conditions, especially as it continues to heat up over the next several days, and we don't see any wet weather coming our way, and that just really pushes things over the limit here. So I want to just remind folks, if you're taking advantage of the weather and getting out and doing camping and things like this, even this coming weekend, be really, really careful with what we're dealing with. Clockwise circulation around that ridge, it's continuing to block things to the west, some convective stuff there. The heat, I was showing earlier in the show how that is building, not just for us here in southern Ontario, but in northern Ontario, it's already there, and that's why there are heat warnings in place. Currently 32 degrees in Kapuskasing. You get a little bit further to the west and the temperatures come down a little bit, and the same thing a little further to the east, just on the outskirts. But under that dome, really the center of it, and we are there in the Great Lakes dealing with this. So the precipitation outlook, there's not much to see here. It's all going to be going around. As I look towards our long-range forecast, it does appear this is going to hold for us through next weekend, and maybe a chance of showers next Monday. But you know, I'll be updating you as we go through time and get closer to that. Overnight temperatures tonight, 14, 15 degrees for that overnight lows. So the overnight lows are getting milder and warmer too. And then we're going to find the humidity building as these temperatures build. By the time we get to Friday, Miravel, it's likely going to be feeling like 34 to 35 with that humidex value.
Yeah, that's something to prepare for sure, Colette. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Talks involving 50 countries began today with the goal of reducing pollution caused by plastics.
We gathered here in Paris because the linear plastic economy is gushing pollution galore, choking our ecosystems, warming the climate, damaging our health.
The United Nations hopes the countries will agree to a binding treaty to be implemented by 2024. It has a plan to cut plastic waste by 80% by 2040. Some environmental groups criticize the plan for focusing on waste management. They say that's a concession to the global plastics and petrochemicals industry. What they're demanding is the production of plastic be cut. And as we head to break, here's a look at where the markets closed today. The TSX climbed up by 47 points. No reading on the board there for the Dow, but the Canadian dollar traded up to 73.57 cents US. We'll be right back. Former Toronto Raptors head coach Nick Nurse has reached an agreement to join the Philadelphia 76ers, according to ESPN and the Associated Press. Nurse joined the Raptors in 2013 as an assistant coach before being named head coach in June of 2018. He then coached the Raptors to their first NBA title the following year. Nurse was fired last month after a disappointing season where Toronto failed to make the playoffs. He's set to replace Doc Rivers, who was fired after a round 2 playoff exit at the hands of the Boston Celtics. Well, for the second time in 3 years, Canada has won gold at the Men's World Hockey Championship.
And the countdown's on, and Team Canada has done it again. Gold at the World Hockey Championship.
Team Canada beat Germany 5-2. It is Canada's 28th win, the most of any country. The silver medal was Germany's best showing since 1992. Latvia beat the U.S. in overtime for the bronze, that country's first medal ever at the championships.
Wir sind so etwa 250 Kilometer voneinander getrennt, trainieren so eigentlich.
That is decathlete Pierce Lepage, the newly declared champion at the Hypo meeting in Austria. A Canadian has now won the competition for 7 straight years, but this is the first time that wasn't Damian Warner. Devin Haru, CBC Sports, takes a look at the competition between the two Canadian decathlon powers.
10 events over 2 days. It is the ultimate test of endurance and strength, and the Canadians are on top. What a battle it was over this past weekend in Gotsis, Austria, between Pierce Lepage and Damian Warner. In fact, after the first day of competition, after 5 events, Warner holding a slim 18-point lead. But on the second day, in the final 5 events, it was the 27-year-old Pierce Lepage from Whitby, Ontario, winning his first title in Gotsis. Coming into this, Warner had won the title in Austria 6 consecutive times. He's considered the king of Gotsis, and now the crown goes to Pierce Lepage. He racked up 8,700 points. That's a world-leading score this year, just 1 point shy of his personal best score. We heard from both of the athletes after the competition.
Yeah, I felt pretty good. I wasn't expecting that javelin at all, so pretty happy with that. And you know, they say decathlon begins on day 2, and I feel like I showed up on day 2, and now we're here.
The first decathlon of the year, you never really know what to expect, and this was a fight. Overall, I'm not pleased with the result, but I'm happy with the way that I finished, and certainly a good start to the season. I got the Olympic standard out of the way, which is always a good thing, and to have Theo here and Jen, my family out here, was really cool.
For Warner, this is a step in the right direction. He was returning from injury, a hamstring strain 10 months ago at the World Championships in Eugene, Oregon last summer. And for Pierce Lepage, a breakthrough victory. He's been somewhat in the shadow of the Olympic champion Damian Warner over about the past 10 years. Every time he's shown up at a decathlon, he's ran into Damian Warner, but now he is on top, and it sets up a dramatic showdown in August at the World Championships in Budapest. Both Lepage and Warner will be looking for their first world titles. For CBC Sports in Toronto, I'm Devin Haru.
Well, I'm proud of it, but I just want other people to do, to continue doing the same thing. I mean, just the age, it's just a number as far as I'm concerned. It was amazing. The support I had was fabulous. People I don't even know.
Age is just a number. A bit of wisdom from 96-year-old Réjean Fairhead, spoken right after she finished a 5-kilometer race in record time, 51 minutes and 9 seconds. That's the world record for a woman over 95 years old. She used the opportunity to raise over $7,000 for a health charity that helps seniors and veterans. I mean, that's the inspiration we need.
Exactly. It's making me think. I mean, some days I don't even have that much energy at my age, and I'm like, wow. Very inspirational. I love it. Really nice evening. If you've got plans outdoors, yes, close to the water because of the breeze coming off the lake. It is a little bit of a cooler feel. We're sitting at 24 degrees, but lots of warmer temperatures surrounding us. I will point out Halifax, as we've been talking, of course, a lot about that area with the fire, 11 degrees, but yesterday was record-setting heat. It was over 31 degrees, and they are going to be warming up again. So dry conditions prevail there, too. Overnight frost, 14. Look at this. Yep, we're going to start heating up. 27 tomorrow, and dry, sunny through the period, and some humidity coming back into our air as well.
Gonna mind that and bring out the sunscreen. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
That's our show for you tonight. We're gonna leave you with a flyby